Hello, everyone. This is Herman Rodriguez. This is my final presentation for CIT 260 Object-Oriented Programming. So, in this presentation, we're going to review a little bit what we have been seeing during this semester. The first topic to review is static and non-static methods and variables. So the big difference of these two things, especially with a static method, what makes it special is that you call this method directly from a class. Instead, a non-static method, you have to create first an object of this class and then call the method directly from the object. So that is the first difference. Then, regarding the attributes or variables about non-static and static, the special thing that makes a static variable is that all the instances of the class that we are creating are going to share the same variable. So, for example, in this case, we have the class City of Aaron, and we have the attribute the game. So if we create many instances of City of Aaron and we use the method get the game, we're always going to be referencing the same game because all the instances share the same attribute. So this is the big difference. Here is an example of the non-static application. Here we are creating an object of list items, and for example here we are calling the setAnimals method from an object. Okay, the next topic to discuss are lists. So we have seen three kinds of lists during the semester: arrays, array lists, and enums. The big difference between these lists, so we can see that, for example, arrays are fixed lists. We have to define how many elements are going to be contained in this list. We can access them by an index number, and the elements that are inside have to be of the same data type. So an array list, the big difference is that this list is not fixed, so it's a dynamic list, so you can add or remove elements inside. And then the enum, the difference is that the elements inside this list are constants. So first of all, it is a fixed list and they are constants. So the elements stored in this list are never going to change. So now we can see a few examples of how we implemented these lists in our game. So for example, an array list we used in this method that's called createToolList. For example, we decided to use an array list to store different tools that the user is going to have in the game. So we used an array list because we thought, well, maybe we can add a functionality later to add or remove tools from the list. So we need a list that has this flexibility that can grow or reduce. So for this example, for enums, we needed to define the team members, and we use an enum because here we have a list of the members who created the game. So these values are never going to change. So in this case, it was easier to use an enum to apply this. For arrays, an array, a fun example that I found was in the map class. We have an attribute called locations that has a double dimensional array. So this is a map that is basically a matrix that has 5 rows and 5 columns. And we created this map using 2 arrays. So each array of rows contains 5 columns. So it was very fun to work with this. You can see here in the class it's just defined, and there's a method in the game that uses that's called create map that initializes, so creates a new map object and uses the constructor to set to initialize the location double dimensional array. So both max row and max column have the value of 5. So this constructor, what it's going to do is create a matrix of 5 rows for 5 columns. We also decided to use arrays in this scenario because with arrays, since you can access the elements and the data inside of an array with an index number, it's easier to iterate through and see each element. So here's an example of how we did this. So here we show how you can use a for loop to iterate through an array. So since this is a two-dimensional array, you can see it as iterate first through the rows, and in each iteration you have to iterate again through each column. So you have to use 2 for loops, one inside the other. So the first step was to get the instance of the map. So we can get the instance of the map. See here, get the game. This is a static method, and here we just use get the map. Then we use a for loop to iterate through the rows, and then another for loop to iterate through the columns. In each for loop, you can see that we create a variable that is going to act as a counter, and it starts at 0 and ends at 4. This way, you can see it's going to have it's going to iterate 5 times, starting from 0. And the I is going to represent the rows, and the J is going to represent the columns. And inside the second for loop, you can see that we're going to use the getLocation method, and we're going to pass the I, that's going to be the row, and the J, that's going to be the column. And this way you get the exact element. And with this process of using the 2 for loops, nested for loops, you can iterate through the whole matrix. So this was very fun to do. Okay, jumping to the next topic about exceptions. Exceptions are when an error occurs during runtime in our code. And in this class, we created a custom exception called crop exception that inherits from the exception class. And we created a constructor that receives a string as a parameter. So how can we use this is, for example, in the setLand method that we use in our game, we make a validation, and if we see that the user input was less than 0, for example, this is going to cause an error. So what we do is, if this is true, we go throw a new crop exception, and we pass the exact error. So this is very helpful because it helps you to understand where the error is coming from. So the next topic is character streams versus byte stream. This is a small explanation about why we have to use character streams. At the beginning, in Java, we used byte streams, and as you can see, a byte stream reads and writes binary data 1 byte at a time in a sequential order. And byte streams is used to read and write characters from data stored in ASCII format. But the problem is that Java nowadays uses Unicode instead of ASCII. And Unicode as Unicode character uses 2 bytes of memory and supports all languages, not only Western languages, as it says here. So the solution is to use character streams. This supports characters in both ASCII and Unicode, and well, it allows you to read and write characters data regardless of the format that is stored in. So this is why we have to use character streams to prevent any error. The next topic is how to write character data to an external file. So this was another exercise that we had. It's basically 3 steps that we have to do. First, it would be to create a file stream. This is the first step. We use the new keyword and the class print writer, and we pass in as a parameter the file path. So this is the location where the file is going to be located. Then we write the data to the stream. Here, for example, I'm using the print writer variable that we created, and you use a method called printLine to print an entire line. And while here I'm using a for loop to iterate again through provisions. So here's the list of provisions, and here I'm iterating using a for loop and going through each provision in this list and writing that to the file. And then the last step will be to close the stream. So here we see that you just have to use the variable and the method close. And this, notice that we close the stream inside finally to ensure the stream closes whether there is an error or not. You can see there's a try and catch statement here. So the code is going to try to do this. If there is an error, it's going to exit this process, go to the catch statement, and handle the error. And if it succeeds or it goes to the catch statement here, the finally statement always is going to run. So this is why we put the close, we close the stream always in the finally. Okay, so that's basically the end of the presentation. We can check a little bit. Here is the next NetBeans with the code. I can run it a little bit to review a little bit about the game. So here we get the main menu, the game menu. I'm gonna just use a few things of the game to show a little bit about the functionality. Press 1 to start a new game. Here again gets me a greeting. Erman will be my first name. And here's the game menu. So here we can use any of these options. So here we can see the map that we were looking at before. This is going to be the village map and the description of each symbol. For example, if I go to view print list, I can choose any of these lists to look at. I can look at the 3 provisions. Ask me if I want to print to a file or just view it. We can just view it in this case. And here we have the list of the provisions. So this is basically a small demonstration of how the game works. I hope I explained everything good, and if there's any questions, you can just let me know, write a comment, and that would be okay. Okay, so thanks for hearing, and goodbye.